Good morning, buenos dias, buongiorno, guten tag. We are here to talk about not one, but two episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Myself and my co host Josh Pritchett will take you through broken circles and to the stars through difficulty to show how fantastic the two episodes of Strange New Worlds were. So, for this double feature, I will introduce you to my co host, Josh Pritchett. Josh?
Good morning, Chris. Nukneh. Welcome, all Federation starships in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. We are back after a long hiatus between Star Trek shows.
Yes, and as most of our viewers know, I was doing some stunt double work for a movie that will come out in less than 1 week.
Yes. What is the name of the movie?
It is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and I was serving as the butt double for Harrison Ford.
Magnificent. And in the interim, I got a new book published. Yes, it is now available on Amazon. We will have more details, but it is called The Adventures of Madison Brown, the Robot Repair Girls. And those of you who have followed me for a while know that I have been writing these stories and publishing them through the Brave New Girls anthology series. But this is a new book that will be available for sale at Shore Leave in 2 weeks. So come by and see me and get a copy. So we have two.
Just for the newcomers, can you remind everyone where Shore Leave is taking place?
Yes, we will be at the Hunt Valley Inn, just off of Interstate 63. Did I get that right?
Okay. Yeah, you got it right. And it's also, for those of you who may be in the Baltimore area, it's an easy trip on light rail to get there.
Yes, we are almost literally across the street from the station there, and it's right at the end of the line. And just come on up, see us. Come, and we got a great lineup of people coming this year. We're going to have a lot of people from Stargate, Star Trek Voyager, Farscape. It's going to be and Battlestar Galactica too. So it's going to be a hell of a weekend.
Wait, before we reveal any more, did our check come in for the sponsorship from Shore Leave? Because otherwise we have to limit it right there.
Oh, wait. Yeah, but I think it bounced. Darn it. Okay. All right. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about our show.
Yes, let us talk about our two new episodes of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Yes. So
it was a bit of a twofer, although indirectly this wasn't cited as part 1 and part 2, but it really is, because you see things leading up to the trial of Una Chin Riley, and then something happens, and then the second episode you see the actual trial. But what I thought both episodes did well is they allowed breathing room, if you may, to showcase the talents of the complete crew. So you barely see Pike in the first episode, Broken Circle. Then you get a lot of Pike in the second episode, which is the Ad Astra per Aspera. But the absence of Pike allowed other people to step up. We get the return of La'an, and so we really do get to see the entire crew, including the introduction of the Carol Kane character.
Yes, and we got it was also, we got to see a lot of Klingons in the first episode.
How did that make you feel?
Warm and fuzzy.
Warm and fuzzy.
Like a dead Tribble.
Like a dead Tribble. Excellent. All right. Well, then, without further ado, let's get into a synopsis of both episodes.
Let's fly.
Let's start with Broken Circle, where we see that the Enterprise is at Starbase 1 for some updates and some repairs. And I really like this because a ship that is that big and that important should be coming in for regular repairs and maintenance. So I really like that they're doing this. And you get a narrow voiceover from Captain Pike saying that he senses things are kind of tense. Um, he visits Una, and Una says, like, this lawyer that could really help me. It's inferred it's a lawyer, doesn't take her calls. So Pike says, I'm going to go talk to him myself. And it's about 2 or 3 days away. And he leaves Spock in command of the Enterprise. And Spock is like, I'm not sure this is a great idea. And Pike says, everything will be fine. And Spock says, well, aren't those like famous last words? And of course, Spock is right because Uhura receives a faint distress call that turns out it's from Lan, who has been missing since episode 8 because she's on a quest to reunite Oriana with her parents. And Robert April says, no, you guys can't go out there because she's sending the communication from a planet that is still disputed, kind of a leftover from the Klingon Federation's war, in which it's a key planet because it's built out of dilithium, which is a key component for running the engines of all starships, and says, well, we rotate ownership of this. 1 month it's the Klingons, 1 month it's the Federation. So happy for you to go check it out when it's under Federation control, but we just started the month of Klingon control. And so Spock brings together everyone from the bridge crew and says, yeah, we're going. And so he tries to fake a problem with the warp core, but the problem is that Commander Pelia is on board, and she's an expert, as he tells Spike, excuse me, thinking of Buffy there, Spock. But yeah, this doesn't quite look like a warp core imminent implosion. You're not doing it right. And so she walks up to Ortegas and says, you got to start venting plasma. And as soon as they start venting plasma, she is, of course, right. And, then they blow their mooring docks and they say, hey, you've got to get out of here because your ship might blow. And, Pelia says, this is interesting. And she makes the reference that I want to talk about later that she knew Spock's mom. And so then they go off to they move away from the space station, but Spock takes the command quite literally, or actually liberally, excuse me. And so he does move away. He moves away to the planet. And so then we get to the planet and we see a scene where there's a drinking contest going on, and it's between Lan and a Klingon. Josh?
Yes. So in the style of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Lan is having a drinking contest with a Klingon. She apparently knows this guy. They've apparently had these before. And so they're tossing back tankards of blood wine. And, of course, she wins the contest. And her prize is to find out the inside information about some sort of information that she's looking for. And she turns around, and there's Dr. M'Benga and Uhura watching her. And so with Chapel and Spock, she tells what's going on. Apparently, she did find the little girl's parents. Unfortunately, though, this planet, things are sort of starting to heat up. And Lan has figured out that there is a contingent of Klingons and ex-Federation soldiers who want to apparently restart the Klingon Federation war. And just don't feel like it got properly resolved. So they're trying to get weapons. So they decide to spread out and try to get as much information as they can so they can alert Starfleet. So Spock and Uhura go with Lan to this big drop-off because apparently she's posing as a weapons dealer and exchanging some phasers in order to try to get some information. Meanwhile, Dr. M'Benga and there's Chapel have gone to this clinic that is treating people that have been recently injured from apparently ionic radiation, which can only be discharged from an exploding photon torpedo. But after they start treating some of these people, some Klingons show up and demand that they come with them to treat some of their people. So they go and they do that. Meanwhile, Alon trades the phasers and gets a general idea that what is about to happen is going to happen shortly. So they beam back to the ship, but have been told by the crew that apparently Mbenga and Chapel have not returned and they've lost contact. So they are trying to find them as quickly as they can. Meanwhile, Mbenga and Chapel have found a huge piece of this puzzle, which is a derelict Federation starship that was apparently disassembled and reassembled inside of this Klingon mine. Chris.
Yeah, so they are quite surprised to find within the vast cavern of this mine a ship. And so they are treating people inside the ship, and Dr. Mbenga is sort of going through some difficulties as old memories from the Klingon War are beginning to resurface. And Chapel can see this. And, at one point, he mentions to one of the Klingons that he is a survivor from this great battle. And the guy's like, no, like there is no one who survived that. And then Mbenga talks about some of his memories of how the air was red with blood. And, you get the sense that this was like just the surface of some terrible memories. And the Klingon seems sort of taken aback. And he and Nurse Chapel quickly realize, okay, they're going to like fake an incident using the ship. And they decide they can't let that happen. And so they realize they've got to send a message to the Enterprise. And they also have got to get out of where they're being held prisoner. And so they take out the equivalent of the super soldier serum that we haven't seen before. It's a green substance, and they both inject themselves with it. And they both seem to know what it is. It's like a super steroid that enables them to like take on all the Klingons in their path and just like mow through them. And so they managed to get to the ship's transponder and send a brief message. And then they tried to get out to the airlock, only to discover the ship has gone airborne. Meanwhile, on the Enterprise, while they've been looking for them, but of course they can't find them because they're deep within the Dilithium mines, Uhura detects that faint message, and they realize the ship is coming up, which is a ship that had been given up for loss. And Spock, who's in command of the ship, is quickly met with a difficult decision that, they have to take out that ship, but in doing so, it would take out Nurse Chapel and Dr. Mbenga. And I think he probably feels it a little bit more for Nurse Chapel than Dr. Mbenga, but I'm sure he wouldn't hold that against him. And so they are hidden in an asteroid field, and they see that there's a big Klingon battlecruiser that has arrived, and they put two and two together. And meanwhile, on board the ship, Mbenga and Nurse Chapel realize what's happening, and there's bits and pieces of an EV suit. And so Mbenga says, listen, this is what we'll do. We'll just jettison ourselves out. And Nurse Chapel's like, well, we're going to die. And he says, well, we'll die in 13 seconds, but don't worry. We'll pass out within 3 seconds, so we won't really feel it. The hope being that the Enterprise would detect them once they leave the confines of the ship. And meanwhile, the Enterprise are trying to take down the ship without much luck because Spock is hesitant to fire on them while they're getting fired on until the ship gets in range of the Klingon cruiser, and you can just see the emotion on Spock's face, and he just says, all right, fire. And so they fire on the rogue ship, destroy it, and then Spock thinks, heck, I've just killed Nurse Chapel. And then they get the faint readings, and they beam both of them on board, and Spock runs to the, clearly showing a lot of emotion, runs to the transporter room and performs CPR on Nurse Chapel, and, is relieved when Nurse Chapel says, do you have to be so rough? And so that's Crisis 1 solved. And Crisis 2 is, he's got to convince the Klingon commander that they do not intend to attack them next. And so he takes advantage of the reputation of Vulcans that they don't lie to convince the Klingon commander that they were there to act beneficially to stop these rogue elements. But the Klingon commander of the battlecruiser is like, I only trust people who I see face to face. So they beam down, and over a large barrel of blood wine, they come to an agreement that they are all okay. Of course, there are some after effects of this, primarily that Spock has a huge hangover that Robert April notices when he reports back. And Robert April is none too happy that he has stolen the ship, gone there when he was expressly told not to go, and that he is nursing a hangover. And he says, weirdly enough, when we all expect like some clear reprimand, not sort of a court martial, we hear him like, let this be your punishment, and the next time there better not be a next time. And it all, the communication drops, and we sort of expect it to go to Spock, but it goes back to Robert April. And one of Robert April's aides says, like, you went really light on him. And he says, I know, but we got bigger problems. And the map, the camera goes to a map, and you kind of understand the tension that Captain Pike hinted at the start of the episode, where you see a map of Federation space, and clearly you see a big blip that says Gorn attack cruiser. So yes, as April notices, he may have just saved us from a war on two fronts. And scene, and then we go to Ad Astra per Aspera. Josh, do you want to lead us off on that one?
Yes, thank you, Chris. So the episode opens with Pike down on a planet having difficulty walking and breathing. He's having to wear a respirator, while apparently all around him, seemingly human aliens who look human are walking around just fine. And he then goes into an office where he is being told that the person who is there cannot see him today. And so he says, fine, I'm going to wait. And he sits down in this chair, and he is almost out of oxygen. He starts to pass out. So finally, the secretary has to, change the environment so it is comfortable for standard humans. We then find out that the people on this planet are, in fact, Alarians, people that have some human ancestry, but are genetically augmented and have continued to genetically augment themselves. The person that Captain Pike has gone to see is a lawyer, is an Alarian lawyer who has a history with Una. She does not want to take the case, or at least she seems not to want to take the case. And Pike has to go through a protracted argument to get her to do it, that this is very important and that Una could lose everything. And so the lawyer finally agrees that maybe this is the chance she's been waiting for to try to tell the Federation that, hey, genetic augmentation is not a crime. Just being born is not a crime. So we then cut to a scene where Una is basically conferring with her Starfleet issued lawyer, and and is basically being told, okay, we're offering you a deal. Dishonorable discharge, but we're going to erase it from your record. It'll be like you never were in Starfleet. You can go on and continue to live as a Federation citizen. Just don't tell anybody you're an augment. And Una is definitely considered. Then, of course, Pike and the Ilarian lawyer show up and say, okay, we're taking over the case now. And Una's trying to be grateful to her lawyer, but she just kind of blows her off that, hey, you left and, I was the one picking up all the pieces. So apparently it was a very passionate relationship. So they're going to go forward with a court-martial of Una, and which they hope to, which basically she's being court-martialed for lying about her, where she's from, which anybody who remembers the Star Trek Next Generation episode, The Drumhead, will recall that a Starfleet crewman lied on his application saying that his grandfather was a Vulcan when in fact his grandfather was Romulan. Chris.
Thank you, Josh. So in the midst of this, the opposing counsel is Captain Batel, who has a very personal relationship, shall we say, with Captain Pike. And you see that when she goes to Captain Pike at the Enterprise and says, like, why does he turn down the deal? That was a great deal. I worked really hard on it. It would have allowed her to, like, not be in prison. And Pike is just saying, well, he's cooking in his room. Well, that's because he's innocent. He doesn't need to plead guilty. And Patel warns him that, listen, like, the judge advocate, my boss, is going to get involved here, and it's things are going to get messy. And so the trial starts, and shout out to the magnificent job as Neera Catal, the Illyrian lawyer, the civil rights Illyrian lawyer, on the job done by the actress Yetide Badaki, who many of you may remember from American Gods. I mean, all throughout the episodes, he does a really great job. But anyhow, it's a three-judge tribunal, and character witnesses are called to talk about how great Una is. And you see Dr. Mabenga testifies, Spock testifies, La'an testifies, and Robert April steps up to the stand. And you're thinking, well, Robert April's going to be a home run for Una. And surprisingly enough, Neera Catal is more hostile with Robert April than Captain Patel is, and really backs him into a corner to admit that there are times that the Federation just looks the other way in their rules, which is true. And he mentions at least three. And there's also a very clever moment where Patel asks Spock, did you ever get the feeling that she was hiding something? And Spock says, yes. And so everyone's like, oh, and they ask, like, what do you think it was? And he says, it was a affinity for Gilbert and Sullivan, which is a nod to Star Trek Shorts and his first day when they get stuck in the turbo lift together. So that was like, a nice nod to Star Trek, to the Shorts. Anyhow, session breaks, and there are a number of people that are not happy with the lawyer, including Una, who says, like, you're just here to make this a political propaganda thing. You don't really care if I, like, get off or not. Robert April goes to Captain Pike and basically says, what was that? And says, she's a great officer. I had her on the Enterprise. I was going to speak about her valor and everything else, but I never got the chance to do that, did I? And so refuses a drink that Pike offers and just storms off. Batel comes looking for Pike, and Pike says, I could be a great character witness. Like, why didn't you call me? And Batel switches to lawyer mode at one point when they're talking and says, okay, Captain Pike, tell me, at what point did you become aware that she was an Illyrian? And why didn't you tell Starfleet immediately? And so he's really taken aback by this. And she says, see, that's what's going to happen to you if you get put on the stand. You are the last person that be put on that stand. And so we go back to the courtroom, and Neera Catal pulls an ace out of her sleeve and puts Una on the stand. And here we get a lot of the background about Una. And earlier in the episode, we see a scene where a little girl seems to be Illyrian, has an injury in her leg. But the parents are really concerned about taking her anywhere to be seen. And you can see the glowing that Illyrians have to cure their own wounds, but they're like, she's too young. She can't, like, do it all on her own. And so we learn a lot about what happened to Una Chin Riley, about how she was an Illyrian on a colony, and how, yes, she was an Arment, but her and her parents tried to live a life just like anyone other, but they were basically persecuted because they were Illyrians. And she talks about how at one point she references the scene we saw with the injury, and like, I had this injury because I tried to break up a fight in school because there was these Federation kids who were accusing another one of being an Illyrian, which is ironic because she was Illyrian and she suffered the injury, and like, she would have died if she didn't find late at night an Illyrian doctor who was willing to treat her. And so she talks about her persecution, and she talked about how she joined Starfleet after the Illyrians were separated into another city, and the people who were non-Illyrians were put into another city, and how her parents, in an effort to provide her with a better life, basically pretended not to be Illyrian and went with the city that was only, like, non-Illyrians. and how she had joined Starfleet in hopes of a better future, and how she had basically outed herself as an Illyrian, which goes back to a scene earlier when Lahan is very worried about Una and attempts to order Hua to look at all the personal logs that were outgoing from the ship. And so Hua's like, I can't do that. That's illegal. And later on, before this pivotal scene, La'an goes to the lawyer and says, listen, I think I was the one who outed her because I was so mad when she told us this. I made a personal log, and I fear someone got a hold of my personal log and just sent it out. And so Nira thinks about this for a second, says no, because, even if the judge advocate had wanted your personal log, it would take months to get it. No, but this conversation is very helpful. Thank you. And so we suddenly realize that all along, perhaps Nira knew that Una had outed herself. And so Una says, I outed myself because I didn't want to live in the shadows anymore. I wanted to just come out, and I wanted everyone to accept me for who I was. So that's a really powerful message. And it seems like that might tilt the day towards her case, but then the judge advocate gets up and he says, well, okay, that's, very interesting. But what I really want to know is, at what point did Captain Pike know that you are an Illyrian? And I remind you that you're under oath. And so there's this hesitation, and he has to say when he did. And then he says, well, this is what I was worried about. This is something that is pervasive, and now it's extending towards one of our finest captains who needs to be called before this tribunal to respond to why he didn't respond and inform the Federation. And so things are looking really grim. Josh, do you want to take us home?
Yes. So a little bit of background. We kind of missed the scene here. There is a point when this Vulcan admiral is talking to Spock. We don't hear what they're saying, but Mbenga and sees it, and he points out the Vulcan's subtlety of body language. And Spock suddenly abruptly stands up and then walks over to Ortiz and Mbenga and says, I apologize for you having to see that outburst. But of all of my father's former associates, the Admiral Patak is the most aggravating. And so the Admiral is conducting most of the questioning of Captain Pike during this scene. And it's clear he's really out to do this, to get Una and Pike at the same time. And Pike has to basically defend himself in Una, which he does quite admirably. But then, of course, the lawyer comes back in, and it is a case about genetics and about augmentation and how this is not a crime. And finally, we go into closing arguments, which is always in a legal drama, whether, it's Law and Order or in 12 Angry Men, whatever you may have seen. And it's always the most eloquent part. And it basically sums up what the whole thing is about. And Una's lawyer basically explains that the whole case is about when Una, that she was seeking refugee status when she joined the Federation, when she joined Starfleet, that it was something that Starfleet could do, and her application that she was not obligated to tell anybody where she was from under that argument. And so the tribunal considers this and decides, yes, that did meet the requirement, and that Una can continue her career in Starfleet, and is still an Illyrian, and that they may have to go back and reconsider this genetic augmentation at some point. But I think that the Vulcan Admiral does make a very good point that genetic augmentation can be very dangerous, and this is something we will talk about shortly in The Good, the Bad, and the Gorn. But I think, but then it wraps up with Una and the lawyer becoming friends again, that we might see her again. And the lawyer says, well, I'm not usually a big fan of Starfleet, but I'm very glad that Una is on a ship full of wonderful people such as yourselves. Thank you. And that is where we bring the episode to an end. Nothing else about the Gorn this week, but so on that note, I think we should head for the good, the bad, and the Gorn. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I believe you're right.
Okay.
And so I think in the good is definitely the whole focus on prejudice that Ad Astra Aspera is all about, and how even in the modern day, the Federation, when you think everything has been fixed, clearly everything has not been fixed. And, the genetic wars have cast a really long shadow, and it's all about fear of what might be instead of fear of what is. And clearly, the Illyrians are not a threat. I mean, they've had to go to the border of the Federation to establish their own world, a world where only they can live in because of the genetic modifications. And, it shows you that you should not let fear be a guiding principle for centuries. That a lot of times what you think is going to happen is not going to happen. And so I thought it did a really good job of showcasing like what fear can lead you to.
This episode was a not too subtle jibe about at the transphobia community, that it's clear that the Illyrians were a metaphor for the transgender community, and therefore I think that Ron DeSantis has probably had this episode banned from Florida if he can. But it really does highlight this. It really, the fact that right now there are a lot of kids that are trans, and that they can't get the medical care that they need, and that some parents are happy to go find a doctor who will just not say, hey, this, will not out this kid. And that is something that a lot of people are having to deal with right now. And I think that Star Trek, being a show that has traditionally been a show that, whether it was the original, Enterprise, Next Generation, has always tackled big issues like this in a way that other shows just are not able to. And that's why I think Star Trek is such an important series. Another thing I thought was really good, and this is going back to Broken Circle, is the fact that, obviously, as everyone knows, I was very happy to see lots of Klingons, and having the Klingons look with the big ridgy foreheads and long hair and beards and everything. It was nice to have that look back after the debacle with the disco Klingons. I just was not happy with that look, but I'm glad we went back to the old look. So that made me happy. And of course, the Klingons, if you look at it, they're wearing out uniforms that are very similar to the TOS era. Instead of them being the metallic silver armor, it's a kind of a gold armor, which is very akin to the original series outfits that they wore. That was very cool. And I like that there's, continuous tension. There's still a lot of heat there from events that happened in season 1 of Strange New Worlds, that how Spock unleashed his emotions while fighting the Gorn, and that he has not been able to completely tap them back down. And he now has definite feelings for Christine Chapel, and that's definitely going to cause a conflict there with T'Pring, who he still has feelings for. So that's going to be really interesting to see. In general, I really like the legal. Star Trek has had a lot of legal drama episodes, going all the way back to the first season of the original series with the episode Court Martial. And it was nice to see that one of the things they did was they had the whole thing where the witness is sitting in the chair and they have to keep their hand on that little palm thing that determines whether they're lying or not, which of course we saw I think we saw that in the first time in the episode Wolf in the Fold, which was written by the great Robert Bloch, and was used to help them find an alien entity that was hiding inside of various humans. So that was really a nice shout out. I also thought it was kind of interesting. Somewhere along the lines, they go back to using discs rather than the internet. And I had to wonder why that was by. And I thought about it. I thought, well, maybe discs would be more, maybe hacking is such a problem. Maybe with big, things like this, using a disc of some type like that is just safer than putting things in an internet database. Chris, did you have anything else you liked?
So I enjoyed the fact that in Broken Bow, we see that M'Benga definitely still has some lingering issues. I mean, he definitely has some hostility with Klingons. And you can see that when they take the super soldier serum, that's what I'm calling it, Chapel just beats up the Klingons because she sees it as a means to, advance the objective. She's not enjoying it. There's a point where you see that M'Benga is really into it. And even Nurse Chapel's kind of like, whoa, wait a minute here. But M'Benga is really getting his kicks out of beating the crap out of the Klingons. And so there's definitely some PTSD going on with M'Benga that I hope we see more in future episodes. But I like the fact that we once again see that not all the officers are perfect, that they can be flawed. And there's a really big flaw here. I also like that we see a return to the fold of La'an. I mean, it's it's a little convenient, maybe too clean, but I do like that we have this character once more back in the fold.
Yes, it was good to see her back. She did leave to help find the little girl's parents. We did see her in the episode of the season finale last year,
The
future version of her.
Yeah.
So
I want to start us off now in the bad, and I do have a particularly big bad to pick here, which is I'm a huge Pike fan. So Pike fans out there, please forgive me for what I'm about to say, but really. Spock takes off with the ship, and there's no reference to that in the second episode. Hey, what the heck did you do here? La'an is back, and there's no reference La'an, it's good to have you back again. Nothing. They're even in the same room watching the court martial, and there's no reference to this. There's no reference to hey, we have a new chief engineer. It is just everything that happened in episode 1 is brushed under the rug. And I thought they really needed to mention this. I would have been perfectly okay if instead of 3 character witnesses on the stand, we had only 2, and that allowed Pike to have 30 seconds of dialogue throughout the episode just to mention these changes that happened, which were only 3 days. Okay, he's only gone for 3 days, and all these things happen. But ship taken, new chief engineer, La'an is back, and it's business as usual, Captain Pike? No.
Yeah, that was kind of out there. You would have thought he would have said something. Oh, hi, La'an. It's good to see you again. How are things going? Oh, Spock, you took the Enterprise for a cruise and killed some Klingons, huh? So, you got to a drinking contest with one? How'd that work? So, yeah.
I know you suffered oxygen deprivation in the living homeworld, but I don't think it sort of caused this amount of short-term memory loss. I mean, just no.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, going back to the oxygen thing for a second, I'm wondering if Pike is just going to be a lot more cocky with himself from now on, because it's hey, I know this isn't going to kill me. I already know what's going to kill me, and it ain't this. So, beam me down to a planet that I can't breathe in. I'll wear this respirator, and clearly also the gravity was also an issue for him too, because he was stumbling and everything. So yeah, he was not having his best day right there, but clearly he knows, dude, I already know how I'm going to die, and this ain't it. So do what you want. I'm good. I've already tried the whole avoid my destiny thing, and it didn't work so well. So, yeah, I have one pet peeve, and that is the actress playing Lieutenant Mitchell. Why is she not being mentioned in the lead up credits? She's an essential character. She gets speaking time. She's in a lot of scenes. Why is she not getting in the opening credits? I know it's not a big deal, but it may not be a big deal, but I just think put her in there with everybody. She could just share the screen with somebody else's name. That's cool. Also, I do want to talk about her when we get to the Gorn part. There's something I want to mention. And but that's otherwise, I don't really have anything else bad about this either episode. I was very happy with them. I thought Ethan Peck was incredible in his acting and the way he's carrying Spock. He's not trying to do it like Leonard Nimoy or or I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the guy who plays him in the Kelvin timeline. Yeah. Anyway, it's not, but he's playing it. He's really made it his own character. We are seeing a side of Spock that we probably have not seen a lot of, but has mentioned, it is somewhat consistent because if you go back to the original pilot, The Cage, which is the first time we saw Pike, you see some scenes where Spock is actually smiling. So we do know that Spock has allowed his emotions to come out every now and again. And we know that one day he will be the basis of a new era in Vulcan thought where, okay, we have to let some of our emotions out. We can't just keep holding those back. We have to find a third way between what is Romulan and what is Vulcan. So there's that.
So a couple of bad things that I had in the episode was one, the role of, I love Captain Batel. I'm a huge Melanie Scorfano fan. I had the luck to meet her briefly at GalaxyCon Richmond. Shout out to GalaxyCon. Love the shows that they put together.
Did we get the check from GalaxyCon?
Yes, and it did not bounce.
Oh, great! Yeah. Love you, GalaxyCon.
Love you, GalaxyCon. Even had an extra zero. Who knew? So, I love the actress. I love the character, but there's I think a problem with how you define the character, because when we introduced to her, Captain Batel is a captain of a starship. Steven says to Pike, "I'll be back around here in a month." Then we see her in the episode finale that she is helping coordinate revamping bases in the neutral zone. And she goes to pick up Una Chin, saying, like, I just was the one who was closest, basically, and I don't enjoy doing this. But then we see her in episode 2, and she's part of, the educator staff, and actually she's leading the trial against Una. So what is her role? Is she a Starfleet captain? Does she work with Starfleet legal, for lack of another word, which I don't think means she could actually be a Starfleet captain? I mean, what is her role? Is it Starfleet captain? Is it Starfleet educator? I mean, so I think there's a conflict there, or a lack of a bit of dialogue explaining how you had this one role, but now you're prosecuting Una. So that is one. The second one would be that the super soldier serum. And we can talk about this more in the Gorn, that, they seem to be able to take this. They're not Illyrians, right? So they can't just control after effects of something. They're about to jettison themselves off into space, and, they say they'll come, even Chapel says it's beginning to wear off, but there's no after effects, there's no shaking, there's no oh my God, all of a sudden I feel so weak because of the lack of adrenaline. I mean, it just seems like, okay, it's wearing off and we're fine. They can't be fine after taking such a huge drug. There should be some immediate short-term effects. And I really want to talk about the science of being able to just survive in space with so little equipment, because I would think at the very least, their eyeballs would have frozen and like busted out. I mean, just something seems a little bit off. So those are my other two things that I thought was like, wait a minute here.
Yeah, I think that was a little bit, dicey. I mean, I think there's a big debate about how long someone can survive outside in space without a spacesuit. I mean, it isn't just being frozen, it's the radiation.
And also, if you're going at such high speed, if you're jettisoning yourself out of a vehicle in high speed, um, like wouldn't the forces of I mean, the G's alone, wouldn't they just like crush your body? I mean, I
Yeah.
understand if you exit, but when you're going at high speed, it just, yeah, I have some problems with that.
I'm sure there's some NASA astronauts that might have watched this episode. It's like, you can't do that. That's no,
Yeah.
I'm sure they're getting a lot of uh-uhs. I think, that was kind of dicey. And it was kind of like, okay, I think they should just gone with good old fashioned. Ooh, scan for human life sites. Ooh, we found them, beam them out, blow up the Klingon ship. That's it. I think they should have just done that. But I think they felt like, okay, from a writing standpoint, we needed to have Spock have one more big emotional outburst and say, hey, oh no, Christine, don't die, and no, you did not die. And, and have a cute scene where Jess Bush says, why you got to be so rough?
I mean, it's very plausible that since they had to rush the launch, that you could have easily said like, yeah, weapon systems were online, but shields were like intermittent, and so they were able to beam them out while the shields were fluctuating, just something like that. And I would have bought that. This I'm not sure I'm buying. But Josh, you said you had some stuff about the Gorn, so lead us off.
Oh yes, okay. So I think I think. Oh yeah, sorry. So, of course, we get into the whole thing with the genetic augmentation, and I pointed this out that how that's a metaphor for the trans community. And yes, I think they made some good points on both sides. If you go around thinking you're superior to people, and the science of this bears me out because this has been studied for 50 years by the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, which is deals with serial killers. That there is a tendency for people to think, many serial killers think that they're superior. And if you are told, hey, you're faster, you're stronger, you're smarter, you think you're superior, and you tend to treat people as inferiors, and okay. The prevalence of con is something people should probably be worried about. But at the same time, okay, just because you had somebody like a Khan and a few other augments doesn't mean that's going to be every person that's genetically augmented. As we found out in Deep Space Nine, Dr. Bashir was an augment, and it turned out, okay, the big difference before everybody's like, well, wait a minute, you had this whole thing with Una. Why didn't that carry over into Bashir on Teacher Said? Well, first of all, two totally different cases. Una is raised in a culture where genetic augmentation was part of their cultural heritage. Julian, or Dr. Bashir, his parents decided to have him augmented because they were afraid that he was not going to, that he was just going to, not have a good life, that they thought he had a lot of problems, and they thought that he needed more help, and so that's why they did what they did. And basically because of that, because he didn't choose to genetically augment himself, this was done to him. He didn't suffer the consequences. They found a workaround on that. I think when people go around, maybe trying to, and this is not a dig at the trans community, because that's a legitimate condition, but people like taking steroids, and we're going to get back to the super soldier. I'm going to go back around to the super soldier thing here in just a second, but just doing that and putting your body through that kind of risk like that to play a sport or, be better in the military is extremely dangerous. And it's giving you an unfair advantage over other players. Getting into the super soldier thing. I think we're going to find out more about that, Chris. I think that, I don't know if we're going to find out that Dr. M'Benga has an addiction to it or what, but that, there's got to be some sort of side effects to this. But I think at the same time, this was clearly something Starfleet or Section 31 developed as a means to give Starfleet officers an advantage over Klingons because Klingons are stronger and usually more aggressive. So giving them an advantage that would enhance their strength and aggressiveness in a hand-to-hand combat situation with Klingons probably was seen as a good idea at the time. So the fact that M'Benga is always carrying it around with him, at least two of them around with him just in case, is saying something. So I think we're going to find out that his activities during the war were a lot more extensive than we realized, that he wasn't just, being a field surgeon or something, that he might have been involved in research and development. Chris, what do you think?
So my big Gorn thing is the introduction of Commander Pelia. I love Carol Kane. I really do, but I don't know if this is going to work. I'm going to give it an incomplete. I'm willing to see more of her. I think the thing I like the most about the introduction of Commander Pelia is the fact of the mention of her past history with Spock's mom, because there's so much that's been done. One could say almost too much with Saavik, but Amanda Grayson, very few people focus on. And so if this is a backdoor to give us some more story about Amanda Grayson, I'm all for it. But even down to the accent, I am not so sure about Commander Pelia. And, if they do indeed end up replacing Commander Pelia, I mean, is this an instance that we're just going to have every year a different engineer? It's just like Spinal Tap. This is a Spinal Tap syndrome. I just don't know. I mean, I did like her dialogue with Spock about, what is the thing that's hardest, and the classic answer seems to be, oh, you see all your friends die, and she's like, no, it's the boredom, and this ship is anything but boredom. So I get that part I liked, but I need to see more of this character because I just do not, I don't know. I'm giving it an incomplete. So that's my one Gorn. My second Gorn is, I'm not totally buying if you have a chain of command that Uhura could actually just deny La'an's request. I'm not going to do that. And what's to stop La'an from waiting for the next communications officer to come on duty and then asking that person to give her access to the personal logs? And so, being able to just, being basically the lowest in the totem pole, and just tell a superior officer, no, I'm not going to do that. Questions about that, I don't know. And then thirdly, my other Gorn is, the catchphrase for when you go out, whether it be hit it, let's fly. It's almost a little too cute that each one has the catchphrase, but it seems that this is a thing. In Star Trek Picard, they cut off right before Captain Seven can say what a catchphrase is, but I did enjoy that Spock, has no catchphrase. He's like, I want the ship to go very fast now. It's just all the captains need a catchphrase. So that is my, it's something that started with engage, right? But do we really need it? So those are my three Gorn things.
Okay, if I could respond real quick to each one of them from last to beginning.
Wait, I didn't respond to your Gorn things.
Oh, well, I just wanted to say, though. First of all, my catchphrase when I'm promoted to captain will be hammer down. We're gonna go do a little NASCAR reference there.
Okay.
Not a big, I like that one. Hammer down, Chris. Hammer down. Okay. Then I just wanted to
Has our NASCAR check came in?
Yeah, and I just wanted to also say about Commander Pelia, I was a little disappointed that nobody called down to engineering and said, "Have you checked on the dilithium crystals yet?" Okay, you're not laughing. So that's a little reference to Carol Kane's first film that she starred in, When a Stranger Calls. That's where that iconic scene where the phone keeps ringing is like, "Have you checked on the children?" That when I think of Carol Kane, that's where my brain automatically goes. Well, that and The Princess Bride.
Princess Bride, yeah, it's about to say Princess Bride.
Yes, well, in which case we can hope that maybe her long-lost husband, who will be played by Billy Crystal, will show up. Yeah. And maybe he will work in the phrase, "It'll take a miracle. Bye-bye!"
Have fun storming the castle.
Yeah, he could look over at a Klingon and said, "You are the brute squad."
Have fun attacking the Klingon ship.
Yeah, which, by the way, in case anybody's wondering, Princess Bride is like easily my number four favorite movie of all time. So I think we got to wrap that up. But before we go, I think we need to address something that a lot of Trekkies have been upset about the last 48 hours, and that is the announcement that Paramount Plus will not be airing season 2 of Star Trek Prodigy, and that it has decided to take the whole series off the streaming service, which is unprecedented and very infuriating to those of us who've fallen in love with that, particular chapter of the Star Trek universe. I'm still in shock about it. I've been talking with a lot of friends about it the last few days. Chris, what are your thoughts about that?
I am probably less shocked than you are, and that's because I remember a couple of times Armin Shimmerman, when I've been able to see him, has mentioned that Paramount is the Great Ferengi. And so you saw what HBO did shelving the Batgirl movie because they realized they could make more money in the tax laws than in actually showing the movie. So seeing that example, they probably thought, okay, if we show this, we have to pay residuals to the voice actors. Every time this is shown, we're going to be on the hook for paying these actors. And that's going to be probably for a very long time because, as we know, Star Trek has legs. And so they probably did a cost calculation and they said, we actually save more money by shelving this and not showing it to anyone than if we show it and then we have to pay residuals. And, it might be because the ratings weren't high enough or they didn't reach some type of plateau. But if you take Armin Shimmerman when he says Paramount is the Great Ferengi, yeah, this is a sign that they are the Great Ferengi because they didn't think anything about just like canceling a show when it's already made. Again, HBO started us down this line. So they've seen that and they're like, we can do this too. It's not cool, but I can see the logic. It's a cold numbers logic. It's not right, but I can see why. So in that sense, I'm not totally shocked.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that Paramount is not in the business of making Star Trek or making us happy. It's in the business of making money. That's what every corporation is here for, is to make money. And we have to understand that even if they make things we enjoy, whether Disney's making Star Wars and Marvel products, whether Paramount's making Star Trek, go down the line, it doesn't make us any happier. It makes us a lot more angrier. And, at some point, I think we have to ask ourselves, when is enough for the people that run these studios? But I don't think we're going to solve that today. So,
we have a writer's strike and we're probably going to have a SAG Screen Actors Guild strike in just 5 days. So yeah, there's a lot wrong with these studios. So there's a lot more wrong than right.
Yes, agreed. And at some point, like I just said, when is enough enough? When is the great Ferengi sated? When does this stop? And at some point, the workers, the people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, the people writing the shows, those are the ones we care about. We don't care about some overpriced bunch of executives sitting up in the front office collecting all the money. At some point, this needs to stop. And, at some point I know, get off my soapbox, Josh, but
on the other hand, I will say that people need to watch the shows in order to avoid this from happening. If it had higher ratings, it would have been, I'm not saying it would have stopped them, but it would have been more difficult for them to justify this decision. I mean, I'll confess, I didn't watch Star Trek Prodigy.
Yeah, but the thing is that maybe because they build it as a kids animated show, that might have been it. But I thought they had stories that would have fit in just fine on a Strange New Worlds or Picard or any of the other Star Trek shows that are out there. They did a whole thing where Dal, one of the main characters, he's an augment, and that was really talked about. And I know our production team is probably they're wanting to queue up the next show here on Movers and Shakers. So, in which you're all going to want to stick around and watch, because Brandon Troy and some other folks are going to be doing a great big discussion on Marvel's Secret Invasion. So you'll want to stick around for that. So, Chris, you want to tell us where we can all find you and everything?
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Also want to give a big shout out to the organizers of AwesomeCon, where both Josh and I were last week, and it was a terrific con. So I just want to say thank you for the people who put this together. If you haven't gone to one before, make sure to go to AwesomeCon. AwesomeCon will happen earlier than ever next year, March 8th. But that said, if you want to see some of the pictures I took at AwesomeCon, some excellent cosplay, there's a especially good Bilbo Baggins there in the middle. You can go to my gram at Verde Cosplay.
Okay, and just a side note, yes, the check from AwesomeCon just cleared. So we
and I got a bonus. Didn't you get that bonus?
I did get the bonus. Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you. Well, of course, it's AwesomeCon. So thank you for being awesome, AwesomeCon. Yeah. And I remain Mr. Josh Pritchett. You can find me on Facebook at Josh Pritchett Jr. and also at the Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup on meetup.org. And my book, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural, is still available on Amazon. And it is now joined by a new book, which we're going to be, we might be giving away some copies from here very soon. It is called The Adventures of Madison Brown, The Robot Repair Girl Chronicles, which is, in case you have some young folks, you want to get into science fiction, it's a perfect YA collection of stories. And once again, I will be at Shore Leave in 2 weeks signing copies. So come on by and see me. And that Saturday, you're going to see a really amazing new costume. So, okay. So Shore Leave sent us another check. So we're good. Okay.
Did that clear yet, though?
Uh-oh. Darn
Peace and long life.
Live long and prosper, everybody. Kapla!